I'm Alicia.
And I'm Liam. We both have OCD. And instead of spiraling alone, we decided to turn our symptoms into a podcast. You're welcome.
Here, we overshare real stories, laugh through the anxiety, and talk to actual experts who can explain why your brain keeps asking, what if I accidentally marry my cousin?
Whether your thing is hand washing, mental rituals, or just silently panicking during normal conversations, congrats. You have found your people.
This is a safe place, unless you're an intrusive thought, in which case, get in line, buddy. We're booked.
So grab a weighted blanket, cancel your plans for the 5th time, and let's dive in. This is the OCD Confessional.
And yes, we did check this recording 4 times before uploading it.
Today, we are so excited to talk with Zachary James, the creator behind OCD Destigmatize on Instagram. Zach uses his platform to openly talk about living with OCD, break down stigma, and build community through education and storytelling. He is also passionate about advocacy to help normalize conversations around OCD and mental health. And Zachary, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Welcome, Zachary.
Thank you for having me.
We love to start our conversation off with a confession. Is there anything you'd like to confess today?
Yes. So once my OCD made me block someone I was dating because I was convinced that if I stared them in the eyes, then they would fall out of love with me. So it made sense for me to block them before they had the chance to do it to me.
Wait, block them? What do you mean? Like on social media?
On social media, I just ghosted them completely because I was too afraid that they were going to ghost me.
How long were you guys dating before you ghosted them?
Oh, not even that long. It was so early on in this it was still like talking stages. We think we'd been on like 2 dates, but yeah, I just convinced myself that if I made eye contact, then he would see that we weren't compatible and would break up with me. So in my head, it made more sense that I did it first. So I ghosted him to save myself the heartbreak.
Did you ever get to talk to him about that after the fact? Once you had recognized maybe that OCD was at play, did you get a chance to explain it to him?
No, but he follows my page, so I'm sure he found out some.
Pieced it together.
Or maybe he'll listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
We can give him some closure.
Yeah.
When did OCD first set in for you, Zach?
I was 19 when it first came up. So in early 2019, I was dating someone, and then I suddenly had this intense, intrusive thought that I didn't actually want to be with my partner. But I didn't recognize it as OCD at that time. I just ended up breaking the thoughts became too debilitating, and I broke up the relationship and kind of just thought, because it never happened before, I just thought maybe that it was that I just wasn't compatible. But
when you say thoughts became too intense, the thoughts of doubt, of questioning the relationship?
Yeah. So it started where I asked him out. Up until that moment, I thought that I really wanted to be with him. So I asked him out, and the moment he said yes, my mind just went, oh, well, what if you don't actually want to be with him? And then I became obsessed with how could I actually be sure that I wanted to be with him? And began this kind of obsessive and compulsive behavior around just doing lots of romantic gestures. Romantic gestures became a compulsion for me, where I was going out and buying him flowers, or planning picnics, or planning holidays, or all this stuff to try and prove that I actually did love him. But I didn't realize that was OCD at the time. It went on for about 2 months of just this thing that I didn't really know what was going on, and then eventually I just my brain was telling me that I'd feel so much better if I broke up with him. So I did, and I think that I fulfilled some prophecy, and I did feel better, and suddenly my mind had a lot more clarity because I wasn't in this relationship anymore. And then I moved on with my life. I didn't really think too much about it. I took a break from dating, and then it was a few months later where I was working in my old job, and then just out of nowhere, I was working in a kid's store, and out of nowhere, my brain just said, "What if the reason you're working in a kid's store is because you're a pedophile?"
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the big like like my life came crashing down moment. And had just this whole about 5 months of going through that, having some really unsuccessful bouts with therapy, and not really understanding what I was going through. I still didn't know it was OCD. And then down the line, I googled how to get sectioned for pedophilia, because I was terrified that I couldn't be out in public, so I thought that it was better that I was locked up, so that nothing could ever happen. And then that's when a UK charity called OCD Action came up, and it was the first link that came up, and it was a forum they had, and it said it was someone else commenting on the forum saying, "Is this POCD or am I a pedophile?" And I clicked it, and then found a whole like thousands of people like posting on this forum, saying similar things and talking about this, and people replying to their comments saying this, talking about this thing POCD, which I'd never heard of. I'd never really heard about OCD before this. I was very much the kind of person who would have said, "I'm so OCD" about like the most like silly thing pre this moment, because it wasn't something I knew. And then someone had posted a video on YouTube to I don't know if you know Puro Chrissy or Chrissy Hodges.
Love
Chrissy.
chatted with her. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh no, I did see this actually. Yeah.
Love
So
her.
someone posted a video, one of her videos, and then I watched it, and I remember being like, "This is what it is," and then got into actual OCD therapy. So that there's kind of two parts, but yeah, it was actually relationship OCD that started it all off. But it was a few years after that I realized it was relationship OCD, because it continued with every single relationship I'd get into after that.
So when the relationship OCD popped up and then the pedophilia OCD emerged, you said that you did go into therapy and it wasn't successful. What were they doing in that therapy? Were they under the impression you might have pedophilia tendencies and they were treating that?
So I grew up very religious. I'm from quite a conservative Christian background. And I kind of told my parents what was going on, and the only tools my parents didn't know what OCD was. I didn't know what OCD was. So the only tools we really had then was Christian counseling. So I went to a Christian counselor, and that Christian counselor was the first person I opened up to about OCD, and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm having these horrible thoughts that my brain is saying I'm a pedophile. I don't know. I'm not one, but for some reason my brain is saying I am." And the counselor didn't understand. She didn't know what OCD was either, and I don't blame her for that. But yeah, she interpreted what I was going through is that I was resisting temptation and quote unquote lust. So she began to pray. She began to speak in tongues that I would resist it. It was the most traumatic thing. I remember leaving that place thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have just had a counselor confirm my worst fears." And that's when I Googled how to get sectioned. That's what caused me to Google how to get sectioned. So yeah, it's always been this weird point of reflection, because I wonder how different it would have been and how much earlier I would have got that diagnosis if she was just able to recognize the basic symptoms of OCD. I'm not asking every single therapist in the world who doesn't deal with OCD to know everything about OCD, but you should be able to understand like the basics, and I think that that would have helped. I've since gone back to that therapist and sent a lengthy email saying that I'd like to have a conversation about everything from a very different perspective and a very recovered perspective.
Did you send the email in tongues or?
But yeah, she's never got back to me, so I assume
she never got back to you.
No, and I'm just gonna say that my email got lost maybe, but next time I'm back in the UK, I will be going back to that. I'll be going back in person and talking, because I feel very convicted in my recovery from OCD now, and my ability to talk about it so openly and maturely. So I feel like that is kind of my final my final step in
Yes.
reclaiming everything back that OCD has taken from me.
I mean, the amount of shame that you felt going through that at the time, not knowing what it was, it's a testament to how far you've come and the amount of
Mm,
healing that you've done to be able to now face it and talk about it publicly. That's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
thank you.
It is wild how many people we've had on this show, Alicia, who come from religious backgrounds.
Hmm.
And,
There's some
you know,
common themes here.
I did not really. I mean, my family, we went to church on Christmas Eve and Easter, the major holidays and that kind of thing. And so the moral scrupulosity, the religious OCD wasn't really much of a theme for me. And I tend to think that if you're going to have OCD, you have OCD, and it just tends to
Mhm.
go after the things that you are growing up with and that you value. And so if you grow up in a religious household, then the OCD is going to grab onto that. But I have noticed this pattern of that added layer of shame when you grow up in a religious household where
Mhm.
it's very tough to open up about that when the religion has been telling you not only is this bad, this is a sin and you will go to
Yeah.
hell for this. So I'm curious where you are with religion at this point, if that's
Um,
okay for me to ask.
yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm a very open book. Religion, I my relationship with religion is very much closed. I'd say I've done a lot of reflecting and kind of deconstructing, I guess, of Christianity and the impacts it had on me. And it's not something I resonate with anymore. As I've seen the damage it's done to my family, and I've seen the damage it's done to society. For me personally, I just don't think it's something that resonates with me. And yeah, I think, and as a gay man as well, it was I had quite a bad experience with my church and how they reacted to me being gay.
Mhm.
So yeah, I just don't think that there was uh, much that I benefited really from that religious background, other than just I think maybe triggering a lot of my OCD and kind of fueling a lot of the themes, especially my relationship OCD. I think that it's been such a major impact on how I view my relationships as an adult.
Where was your family in all of this during that time? Were they siding with the church and all that, or were they trying to understand you?
So it's a really interesting one, and it's been 10 years since that happened. Now, I was the first gay person my parents ever knew. Basically, they'd never had any exposure to being gay, and the only kind of concept of a gay person they really had was these someone that is promiscuous and sinful and all these very bad connotations about what it meant to be gay. So I think when I came out, it was really a shock, and my parents had a really bad reaction to my coming out initially. My mum said that she was devastated, and my dad said that he didn't want me to catch HIV,
How old
which
were you when you came out?
I was 18 when I came out. But since then, I don't blame them. I blame the life, the education they've been given around
Right.
it. And since then, it's been 10 years. My parents come to Pride with me. They are very accepting. They love my boyfriend so much, and they're very very like. And that's what life is. Life is about experience, and if you lack that experience, it can sometimes be very daunting, these new things to you. So yeah, I don't blame them at all. I blame the church for
Right.
how they were. But yeah, they're still Christian, but they're much more liberal and I think have deconstructed as well, like deconstructed their idea of what Christianity should be themselves, and how it's much more about your relationship with God than your relationship with the institution of Christianity, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm
Yeah.
glad they were able to come around and that you kind of helped show them the way on that. When
Mm.
you think about your experience as a teenager with OCD, you say that's kind of your first recognition that something was up. Do you look back on your childhood and have you recognized anything in your childhood where you go, "Oh, that was probably a sign that something was up."
Yeah, so there was this time when I was 13. I always remember because it was around the time my nan died. She was in the hospital, I was in the hospital quite a lot when I was younger, just going to see her, and I remember there being like hand sanitizer, like pumps in the hospital as there are, and I remember like constantly using them, and like always like having my hands and like my hands would be red raw like all the time because I'd be just constantly using this antibacterial stuff in the hospital. Um, and just became obsessed with germs. And every night I'd go and talk to my mum and be like, "Mum, I've just touched." It was kind of this interaction with my puberty happened, and then my nan was dying at the same time, and they kind of interact with each other. So suddenly it was all of these new sensations and things were happening with my body. I was having like sweat and smelling and all that, and it was not something I suddenly felt very out of control with my body. So yeah, I'd constantly kind of go and ask my mum, like, "Oh, mum, I walked past some dog poo and I think I stepped in it and it might have splashed onto my fingers, and then I don't think I washed my fingers, and now I put them in my hands. I've put them in my mouth. Am I going to die?" And that would be my routine every night, and like washing my hands, ask my mum if I was going to die. And my mum obviously didn't know it was OCD, so she'd be like, "Yeah, you're fine, it's okay," and she just
Right.
reassured me.
She's reassuring.
And then I grew out of it. Like that's what I always say, I grew out of it. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I can't remember when it stopped. I didn't have any therapy for it or anything. It just, at some point, I didn't do it anymore.
So you've talked openly about how OCD has latched onto your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
What other areas? You've talked about schizophrenia. Should we dive into that?
Yeah. So schizophrenia or OCD, arguably, I think was next to relationship OCD my worst theme. It kind of happened in uni. I'm in the UK, and UK culture is very much about drugs and drinking. It's very much encouraged and celebrated. And with doing drugs come these big come downs. And I remember always on these come downs, I'd have these like brain zaps, and my brain would get really like fuzzy. And then one day I just convinced myself, I was like, well, what if these these bad feelings you're having, these like depressive states you're getting after drugs are actually a sign of schizophrenia? And I became obsessed with it. And I remember thinking suddenly everything, and even in the corner of my eyes, was something that could be something I was hallucinating. And yeah, so if I wasn't, obviously, you see things in the corner of your eye and you see people in the corner of your eye, naturally, and most people day to day don't even clock the fact that there's people walking past them. But for me, I suddenly, every time that there was someone even slightly in my peripheral, I would just have to look and be like, did I actually see that person? I had to double check, and like it got to the point where sometimes I would literally follow someone to make sure that they were real, just to make sure that I was actually seeing someone.
That's not creepy at all, Zach.
Yeah, exactly. At its worst, I was in uni, and I remember I was in the library studying, and I was looking for a book, and this old man walked past, who looked like Charles Darwin. I remember thinking he looked like Charles Darwin, and my brain, rather than thinking rationally, it's just a man that looks like Charles Darwin, my brain was like, you have hallucinated Charles Darwin. And I became obsessed with the fact that I had just had a psychotic break and hallucinated that Charles Darwin was in the library with me. Yeah, it was, it's, in hindsight, absolutely hilarious.
Wait, were you coming down off a night of partying at that point, or that was just a typical
No,
Tuesday?
this was just a random Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I couldn't find him. I couldn't find him again because he walked away, and I was searching the library trying to find this man, and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I was like, "Wow, he's not here." So clearly that was Charles Darwin, and I just hallucinated him. Yeah. So it was a wild time.
Holy hell.
I'm crying. I don't know why it's so funny that it's Charles Darwin. You go up and ask him like about evolution and oh
Yeah.
What did you do in that moment?
In that moment, I remember going home, lying in bed, and just kind of being like, okay, yep, it's official. I have schizophrenia. that is confirmed. Called my mum, being like, I need a psychiatric appointment. And she was like, okay, well, go to your uni therapist first. So I went to the uni therapist.
Wait,
He
where are we on the
was,
timeline with this? How old are you? And we don't know it's OCD at this point?
we do know it's OCD at this point.
Okay, but you
I,
didn't think that that could be part of it.
I so yeah, the only kind of like idea of OCD I'd really had was the POCD. Like that's
Okay.
the only way in which I'd understood OCD. So
Right.
there
You
were,
didn't realize it could latch on to other areas and
yeah,
have you doubt every
yeah.
freaking
So
thing in our life.
yeah, so I still had a very like lacking education around OCD. There had been so many themes around it. Like I convinced myself I was actually trans. I convinced myself I wasn't gay. I convinced myself that I don't know. You name it. I probably thought that I fancied my rabbit. That I fancied my dad. Like there was a lot of just kind of like mixing themes constantly. It was yeah.
So
I fancy my cat. I love her. I full on smooch her face.
We're going to pause for a moment because this part of the conversation is brought to you by our partners, No CD. The same distressing, unwanted thoughts keep playing over and over in your mind. The same rituals keep eating up your time, holding you back from enjoying your life. You've tried talk therapy before and spent session after session diving into those thoughts, trying to understand them, trying to fix them, but somehow they just get worse. And the shame piles on because you think, why isn't this working? What's wrong with me? If this sounds familiar, here's what you need to know. You're not the problem. You're experiencing something that a lot of people with OCD experience. Getting your life back is possible because OCD is highly treatable. It just requires a completely different approach than other mental health conditions. In fact, standard talk therapy often makes OCD worse because it encourages you to analyze those intrusive thoughts or try to replace them with positive ones. But with OCD, the more attention you give the thoughts, the stickier they become. That's where No CD comes in. No CD provides virtual therapy designed specifically for OCD. Every single one of their therapists is extensively trained in a type of therapy called ERP, or exposure and response prevention, which is the most effective treatment available for OCD. And they get the training from world-renowned OCD experts so they truly understand what you're dealing with, even the stuff that feels impossible to say out loud. In live face-to-face virtual sessions, your No-CD therapist will teach you how to take the power away from intrusive thoughts so you can live the life that you want to live. And between sessions, you'll be able to message your therapist anytime, join dozens of life support groups, and continue your progress with other expert-developed therapy tools. No-CD is also covered by insurance for over 138 million Americans, and their team makes it really simple to get started. Visit nocd.com and book a free 15-minute call. That's nocd.com to learn more and talk to someone who can help, because you deserve treatment that actually works for OCD.
So you see Charles Darwin in the library, and you call your mom and you say, "I think I'm having a
Liam is still
psychotic
hung
break."
up on this Charles Darwin thing.
Yeah.
Why, Liam? Do you have something to confess? Who have you been seeing?
No, I just want to. I want to follow the thread, which is that you then tell your mom, "I'm having a psychotic break," and then what happens from there? Did you go to the hospital?
I went to my therapist. So I had a therapist at uni. It was a therapist that had dealt with me before regarding health anxiety. I'd gone thinking I was having heart attacks about 3 times prior to this incident. And he just kind of, met me with okay, look, let's kind of dive into this and understand it. And he'd already kind of given me these tools to use with my health anxiety and my problems, like my anxiety around my heart. So he basically was just like, before we rush anything, why don't we just try and use these tools with this and what you're going through now, and just kind of sitting with it a bit. So I was like, okay. And he was like, so it was very much, kind of very, he wasn't an OCD therapist, but I think he had a good understanding of how to interact with OCD. So he was
But
just
not
like, maybe
ERP
just,
at this point.
it wasn't, it kind of, what he was telling me, I think, is ERP, but he didn't really, he never named it as ERP.
Got it. Okay.
He just kind of said, he was like, go home and sit with, yes, maybe I'm a schizophrenic, and just sit in that uncomfort and see how it makes you feel. So yeah, that was very much like what he taught me, and it's been so long since I've used it, and I wish I could remember like fully what he gave me, like it was like a logic tree, and he like the write out like the most possible scenarios of what I was actually going through. It was like there was like two like it was like option A and option B, and it was like option A is that I'm actually just having anxiety, and option B, which is the least likely scenario, was that I was actually schizophrenic, and kind of like rationalizing it that way, which is really helpful. But a lot of my themes, luckily, in my experience with OCD, haven't latched on too hard. Like I've gone through really intense periods with them. But yeah, with that, normally medication has really, really helped me. That theme in particular, medication, I think I got onto medication for that theme, and it was really, really helpful. And I react unbelievably well to medication, which is I'm very, very blessed with. Even doctors are always shocked. It takes me about 2 days for medication to kick in. And
What are you
I've always
taking?
been sertraline. So that I've always been told like that they'll say like, oh yeah, it normally takes for like 4 to 6 weeks for sertraline to kick in. But even in my first instance, when I was going through POCD, I took it, and 2 days later, all the intrusive thoughts had gone for me, and it was I was back to my normal self. And then so I was always on it for about 6 months. I'd come off, and then a new theme would start. I'd go back on it. It'd stop. Come off it, new theme, come off it. So I kind of had this very bad relationship with not really understanding that I needed to be doing, because every time I was on medication and every time the thoughts would stop, I'd stop doing therapy. So I wasn't really connecting the dots that I needed to be continuing to work on the tools whilst I was in a place
Right.
where I was be able to think more rationally. So I'd always just stop as soon as I was on medication.
Have you
Sorry,
considered just staying on the medication as opposed to a lot of starting and stopping?
I think I had a lot of something I don't have now, which I did have then, was a lot of shame around medication.
Mm.
I think
yeah.
I hated the idea that I was medicated. I didn't like the fact that I was on it. So I was just so quick I just wanted to be off it. I wanted to do what I was supposed to do. I wanted to do the 6 months and be like, okay, I don't need it anymore. I'm fine, and it'll be different this time. And I'd always convince myself it'd be different. I think in total I had 6 different bouts of just being on the same medication over and over and over again.
hmm
I'm not on
I'm
medication now.
similar,
It's been
Zach. I've struggled too with the idea of it, and I only recently just started the same
mm,
medication. What am I, like 3 weeks in, Liam? Liam knows we keep tabs on each other's meds. He's
Yeah, yeah,
like,
3 or 4
"How you doing?
weeks.
Where are you
Yeah.
at?" Besides the jaw clenching, but I also, like you, feel like my response to the meds is really good so far. I feel I
mm,
just went to a lunch the other day, and I was so present, you guys. It was so nice.
Mm.
mm,
When I would normally be sitting there and the thoughts would just be going like crazy, I I enjoyed myself so much. I got home, I was like, that was the most pleasant lunch I've had in years. Years, just
mm.
because it was just quiet, and I was able to have a conversation and be present and listen. And I don't think you realize how noisy it is until it's not. Yeah, you don't really. I mean, if that's your only way of knowing life, it is just loud and noisy and battling those thoughts, and it's so exhausting. And there's so much work that goes into your everyday that when you do take a medication that works, it's like, holy shit, this is kind of amazing.
I haven't been on medication now. I think it's been 3 years.
Wow.
I've got a
Oh,
real
you're not
hold
on it
on
anymore.
not on it anymore. So
Oh.
in my later, it generally like there was periods when I was on it because of schizophrenia, OCD, but overall the main reason I'd ever get on medication was because of relationship OCD. Like every time I'd enter a new relationship, the thoughts would become really intense. I'd be constantly worrying that I didn't actually want to be with my partner. It would make me feel really depressed, but I didn't want to break up with my partner, so I'd go on medication again, and then that would be how I date basically, and then the relationship would end, and then I'd come off the medication, and then I'd date again, and then have this cycle. But I think in my later years I started to realize that I needed to be focusing on therapy and medication at the same time. So yeah, for the last 3 relationships, I haven't needed medication. I've kind of just been able to manage with tools that I've now learned in a place where I wasn't wasn't already triggered. So, which I think is a really, really important part of OCD recovery.
What does ERP look like for relationship OCD? Because that's a internal one where we have to learn to trust our gut and our own intuition
Mm.
and feelings with these people, right? And what did that look like for you? And how are you in a place now where you have healthy relationships?
Yeah. So I think, and I always say, like, it's in what you just said is really interesting. Because I think the reason that I found relationship OCD so hard is because it's so close to a normal human experience. Like
Yeah.
it's so normal to have relationship doubts. So when OCD interacts with that, it's hard to know what's real and what's not in that regard. But
Right.
ERP for that, which is mainly I like of all the ERP I've done, it's mainly been around relationships. It was writing out breakup texts to my partner. Um, it was, just like telling, saying like I hate my partner and saying these things and like writing down like the things my brain was saying I didn't like about my partner. And just very much trying to sit in that uncomfort as much as possible. But I think the one thing that really helped me with relationship OCD and generally with a lot of my OCD is that doing something and having OCD don't have to be mutually exclusive. So what I mean by that is my brain would say you're going to go and see your partner and you're going to have a bad time, or you're going to go and see your partner and the OCD is going to be so loud that you're going to have a bad time as a result. And I kind
Mhm.
of got to this place where I was just like, I can go and see my partner and have all these bad OCD thoughts happening and still have a good time. Like it doesn't mean
Mhm.
just because it's there doesn't mean that I these thoughts can be really loud and I can still have a good time also with my partner. And that was a really big part of when I started to recover.
Separated.
It was just separate. It was like, yeah, these things can be together. I can go and see my partner and I can go and we can be intimate, we can have sex, we can do all of this stuff, and these thoughts can be present, and that doesn't have to be something that I have to has to be separate. So that was for me a really big part in how I eventually kind of began to separate what was real and what was not, and understanding when it was OCD and when it genuinely was losing interest in a partner. Because it's a very hard thing to
That
to
is hard.
know. I remember the first time um I fell out of feelings for someone, which was last year. Even it wasn't that long ago. I It was apathy. It was a new feeling. It wasn't that I was obsessing over this person. It wasn't that I was like obsessing over whether I liked them or not. It was that suddenly I just couldn't be bothered to text them, and I had a disinterest generally in them, which was a very different feeling to this feeling I'd always had, where I was kind of just constantly trying to find a reason for why I needed to stay with them. So that's been a real big lesson in learning how to navigate between OCD and genuinely lacking feelings.
Was your
Mhm.
relationship OCD always outward facing in that way where your obsession was whether or not you had interest in the partner?
Hmm.
Or did it
Yeah.
turn around at any point too, where, because the relationship OCD that I've experienced, and Alicia, I think, has had a little bit of this too, is much more inward. Am I good enough? Is she falling out of love with me? Is she going to have an affair? I
Mm.
wonder if you experienced it that direction as well, or it was always the other way around.
So it's a really interesting thing with that, because generally it's always been my internal feelings of how I like someone, and like whether I like them. But sometimes, as a compulsion, my and I don't know if this is going to make sense. It makes sense in my head, but I've never said this out loud. As a compulsion, my brain would do the opposite and obsess over whether my partner likes me, because that was the only way I could prove that it was OCD. Uh, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So,
was almost like you were
suddenly,
checking.
yeah, I was checking. I was like, oh, like
Right.
I was checking whether my I was checking whether I was worried that my partner didn't like me. to try and prove that I did have OCD and that what I was going through was OCD, because suddenly I was worried that my partner didn't like me. But that would never last because it would always come back to the fact that I didn't actually like them. And that would always be the main worry. That's very confusing to explain. I hope I'm explaining that well. But that was, yeah, but generally it's always been my feelings towards someone else, and, being very critical of my partner, my brain just kind of replaying on repeat saying, you think they're ugly, you think they're repulsive, you're not going to be turned, worrying, like knowing that I'm seeing my partner later and my brain is saying, you're not going to be turned on, you're not going to be able to have sex, or you're not going to feel like you're in love anymore, or you're going to feel awkward when you kiss them.
I wonder
That would be like
how much of those thoughts were actually valid, though. Do you think any part of it was true in those moments, and that was your OCD latching on to, or do you think it was all
no.
false?
I think it was all false, because what I'd always find, especially when I got onto medication, is that I'd start to be able to see it more, and see that I actually did want to be with my partner. So yeah, but it was a very difficult thing, because OCD can feel so real, and it felt all consuming, and I think that there's definitely a level of like, when OCD is, and I think this is what happened with a lot of my earlier relationships when I was undiagnosed in the undiagnosed with relationship OCD. So I'd been diagnosed, but I didn't know it was relationship OCD. I think a big part of those relationships is that I think I probably did lose feelings on the basis that the feelings weren't worth it because of what I was going through.
Right. You were able to
yeah, like I was
that.
not being incentivized to be in love. Like it was a horrible, debilitating experience. I didn't want to be in it. It really affected my self-esteem, and the way I interacted with love for a lot of my uni experience. Like I had such a bad reputation in uni, for being a bit of a heartbreaker, and my uni had a very small gay community, so everyone kind of knew everyone. So it was very quickly that people just knew me as the kind of guy that just ghosted people and suddenly went quiet, because I didn't know how to date, and it was so. It very much shifted me into this place of like, I only ever wanted to date people that it was very casual. I still wanted the intimacy, I still craved the intimacy, but I didn't want to hurt anyone. So for me, it made more sense to just go for people where only I was getting hurt in those scenarios. So yeah, it had a really, really horrible effect on my self-esteem for such a long time, and such a big part of my early adulthood.
You said that you do have a boyfriend now. How has that gone? Is that still showing up for you in that, or do you have a handle on it?
There's been periods for sure, but like I think I handle my OCD very, very well now. I am able to tell myself if there's a bit of doubt, or if there's some OCD, I can be like, okay, it's fine. It's just gonna it's just a few days of maybe just a bit of bad feelings. I'm always able to just kind of be like, okay, just let it happen. It'll pass now, which is not something I've ever been able to do. But generally, overall, this is the longest relationship I've been in. This is the first time I've been in a relationship where I've been able to feel like I can say I love you to my partner without doubt. Like I know that I love my partner, and I don't worry about that feeling anymore. Like the idea of saying I love you used to, even saying it would cause such like this horrible sinking feeling in my past, and that doesn't happen now. And if it does happen, I'm okay with that feeling, and kind of just accepting that, like, if my friends like, what if you don't love your partner, then I can be like, okay, well, yeah, okay, maybe I don't today, and that's okay. And
Does he know everything about your past with your OCD and how? Well, I'm sure he does. You share everything on social media, but I mean, as far as when those moments come up for you in the relationship, do you share like, hey, I'm having a bad day, or here's where I'm at?
I'm very, very, very open with my mental health, especially with my partner. I found the balance of how to be. I've definitely overstepped that balance, and I think in my past, especially with people who don't understand, being like, well, they're like, I want to understand, and I'm like, okay, well, my brain says you're ugly, and And there I was like,
I
oh,
hate the way you
okay.
chew.
Yeah,
You're
I hate
confused.
everything about you. That's what my brain says. And, and that has got me in situations where my partner naturally has felt, insecure and not wanting to be with me because they don't feel, they believe that what I'm going through is real because they don't understand OCD. And yeah,
Right.
so I've definitely found the balance of like how to talk
TMI.
about OCD. Yeah, yeah. Like I don't overshare. And with my partner, I'm generally just like, look, I'm having a bad day. You don't need to know what my thoughts are saying. Like I know what's going
Right.
on and I know how to help it. I don't find that anyone else, any of my friends or anyone I'm dating can actually really help me with my OCD. Because I don't think there's, especially with where I am with it. Like I know not to look for reassurance. I have everything. I don't really have compulsions with my OCD in the way I used to. It's very much just rumination. Like there's no outwardly seeking reassurance of my partner. It's just like, just a flurry of intrusive thoughts that I'm trying to solve. So yeah, I don't necessarily find it helpful like delving into the intricate parts of my OCD with someone else.
You know what's so
Other than that.
interesting about that is I'm in therapy now. I'm in ERP. I have relationship OCD, and so I was talking to my therapist about, how much should I share with my wife about what we're doing? My wife is a psychologist, so she has a natural curiosity for it. And in the past, I have done a ton of self-disclosure with my wife because I think that that's normally right. I mean, you want to share everything with the closest person in your life, and it also felt somehow helpful to have her guidance as a psychologist and as the person in the world who knows me best. And in my last session, my therapist was like, "Yeah, no, you have to stop telling her everything.
Mm.
You are confessing. You are in telling her everything. You are actually seeking reassurance. If you
Yeah, that's
really
almost a
dig
compulsion, right?
if you dig into it, that's really what you're doing is you're seeking her reassurance. And I was like, if I'm being honest with myself, that's true. I tell her all about this so that I can demonstrate to her how hard I'm working and let her into my world and my brain a bit so that it's almost like I'm trying to get affirmation from it or
Mm.
something.
Yeah.
And my therapist said no more. So the other day, Leah was like, "How's ERP going? What are you guys working on?" And I was like, "It's all going well. Everything's good." She,
Which
I don't
sucks
know what
because
she,
you want to share with your best friend,
Yeah.
right? It's like
yeah,
knowing that
and
line of
I think it exactly right. I want to share it with her, and it's like an interesting topic, and it's something that we could really
how'd
share. And
she take
but
that?
I didn't say my therapist told me I can't. I just
Oh,
said it's going really well, and then I just left it at that. And she didn't push it. I don't know
Mm.
if that's because
maybe she knows.
she knows that she's not supposed to, or I don't know. We haven't addressed it. Maybe she'll hear this and come down and be like, "What the hell is going on with that?" But for now, I'm sticking with that. Not doing the confessing stuff. So it's an interesting spot to be
Good.
in. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Zach, is at some point you mentioned questioning whether or not you have OCD, and I wonder if that's
Mm.
become an obsession for you because that one is so strong for me right now, and I know Alicia has had
Mm.
this one too, and I'm working on it in ERP actually. Is I apparently it's relatively common. People with OCD will start to wonder whether or not they have OCD, or are they malingering, or they're a fraud in some way. I mean, Alicia and I have a whole fucking podcast about having OCD, so if we don't, the stakes are kind of high, like
Mm.
you too, like you have a whole
Yeah.
page devoted to destigmatizing and dealing with it. So how has that one shown up for you?
Yeah, it's definitely shown up a lot throughout my life and different themes. Not so much now. I think like I'm very content with knowing I have OCD, even in a spiral. But I think the worst one for me with it all was I think it's like the official name for it is like the backdoor spike, which basically means when you stop feeling anxious about your thoughts, and suddenly your brain's like you're not anxious anymore, therefore they must be true. And that's always how it would catch me the most. So,
Hmm.
especially with POCD, I'd have these intense feelings of being anxious, and then naturally in recovery, you start to not feel anxious around your thoughts, and then my brain would just catch. So it was like, oh, you're not feeling anxious, and you just had that thought. That means you're a pedophile. Got you.
So
So yeah, like
twisted.
that.
It's
Yeah,
so twisted.
it's wild. Yeah, so that generally is how like the like what if it's not OCD would always pick up for me, and yeah, it's a really difficult one, and I think just overall, what if it's not OCD? I mean, just someone who without OCD isn't even thinking about the like someone without OCD hasn't even considered the what if it's not OCD
Right.
question in their head because they're not even worrying about they just are what they are.
Good
And
point.
That backdoor spike, I've never heard that term. That's such a good way of putting it, because what'll happen for me is that my anxiety about a specific obsession will diminish as a result of ERP and medication. My brain will come in and go, well, I guess you don't value that anymore.
mm,
And like, let's say harm OCD. I experience that a lot with my kids, just worried constantly about them, and obsessing over it and checking. And when I have stopped doing that and worked on the ERP and exposed myself to not doing it, my brain will come in and go, wow, I guess you don't really care whether or not your
You
kids
don't
die.
care. Yeah, I've experienced that too.
Piece of shit. And that's tough.
Are you able to
Where
recognize that in that moment though, Liam? That okay, that's my OCD telling me that I don't care, but I do. That's
with
the
time,
exhaustion part, guys. That's the whole part where people talk about how just mentally exhausted you are. This is what we're talking about. Those moments of questioning the questions and you could be on your journey and doing ERP and feeling like there's growth happening, and then you question that.
yeah, because you have a bad day or a bad phase, and then you're like, oh, I guess this is back, and you're not willing to just sit with it for a bit. I mean, I think so much of this is just learning to sit with it. Learning to sit
yeah,
with it it's everything. Learning to sit with that question of your values, learning to sit with the exposure in the first place, learning to sit with uncertainty, learning to sit with doubt. I mean, it's all just learning to be uncomfortable, which kind of sucks,
hmm
but like that's the card we've been
Yeah.
dealt. I wanted to ask one more thing about, because you have so many subtypes and they're all so interesting. You mentioned gender identity OCD. I don't think
hmm
I've heard of that one before. So tell me a little bit about that.
I'll tell you, and I'll tell you with a great story about how this one appeared. um,
Does it involve Charles
so
Darwin?
it doesn't, unfortunately. Um, but I was in, I think it was third year of uni. It was just before COVID happened, actually. So I went on a night out. I was going on a night out, and my friend, for some reason, I don't know why, but my friend had a pair of silicone boobs. I was like, you know what? I want to wear these tonight. So I put on a bra, put on these like realistic boobs, and I just had like a proper pair of like double D's, just a crop top. I don't know. It was a great vibe, and I was having the time of my life. And just feeling very just fun. Anyway, came home from that night out, and I was like looking at the videos that people had taken in the morning, and being like, oh yes, slay. I'm kind of like looking at the videos, like I ate with that. And then my brain was like, well, what if this must mean you're trans, that you've had this, that you've done this, like you wouldn't like the look of you with boobs if you were a man. So you must be a woman. You must want to be a woman. Um, and then I was like, okay, well that's silly. And then my brain was like, well, what about the times you let your sisters dress you up as a girl when you were 7 years old? You must have always wanted to be one. And then yeah, I kind of just got really caught in it. It was a really weird dilemma in my head because the kind of I've the belief system I have, and like the friends I have is that being trans is not something that I am opposed to or anything. Like, it's not something that's new to
Mhm.
me or uncomfortable to me. It's something that objectively I think that I'd be like, look, it'd be a really hard and difficult thing to go through, but it's not something that I'm completely terrified of. I've always believed in gender being fluid. So then by by me worrying about it, my brain then said, well, then in that case, you must be transphobic. Like you're either trans,
Oh,
Zach, or you're
yeah.
transphobic.
Yeah.
Like there's no in between. You have to pick one or the other. So yeah, that was quite and then COVID happened, and then yeah, so for first lockdown of COVID, it was, I think I came out to my friends as non-binary, just being like, I don't know if I have a gender for like a long time, which wasn't true, and I think that was probably like a confession compulsion or just trying to get
Mm-hmm.
something off my chest.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was. I'd never ever before that moment questioned my gender, or I've always been very comfortable with being a man, and I objectively know that I am one. So it just felt so unnatural to me to suddenly have this identity crisis in my head. But yeah, it was a wild time. Luckily, it didn't last too long. I think maybe the stress of COVID overtook, and it went away. But yeah, it was a
I
wild
mean, it
time.
just kind of goes to show that these natural, I mean, that was like you put the bra on, you had fun with it, and someone without OCD would have just let that be the night. You
Mhm.
had fun, you wake up the next day, you go about your business, right? But with OCD, we latch on to everything needs to have a meaning, a definition to why we felt the way that we felt, and it's like instead
Mhm.
of just having that be a curious thing, you're like, that was fun, cool, I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean anything. We then go, well, I enjoyed myself, so that must mean XYZ, and then you're
yeah,
not able to separate the thought from just a curious thought, a natural thought. I mean, anyone who puts a bra on and
yeah,
has fun is going to go, well, do I want to continue down that path?
yeah.
But
The French used to call OCD folie de doute or folie de doute. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I know I'm not, but which translates to the madness of doubt. And I've always thought that is it's such an apt way to describe OCD, because that's what it is. It's just this madness around like anything you could possibly doubt about yourself. OCD will latch and be like, well, that's something that could be.
mhm,
So therefore, let's focus on it.
the doubt bully.
Zachary, you've obviously come a long way with it. What would you want
Mhm.
to leave listeners with if there's someone out there listening and they're really connecting with your story, but they're struggling and they're not on the other side of it in the way that you are?
It is a very daunting diagnosis, OCD, especially when you get told that OCD is a chronic disorder, or you learn that OCD is a chronic disorder and could be something you deal with for the rest of your life. I
Mhm.
remember hearing that when I was younger and being like, this is going to be my life forever. Like, oh my gosh, this sounds unbearable, and it feels so
Mhm.
relentless and never ending. And when you're in those OCD spirals, it's your brain is like, how is my brain ever going to go back to not thinking like this? It feels so impossible to imagine that you'll think normally again. But somehow you just do. And whilst so I consider myself recovered from OCD, and what I mean by that is that I've changed my perspective on what recovery is. And what I now understand recovery is that I do have OCD and I will have OCD for the rest of my life, but it is not this terrifying thing that happens to me every day. I have intrusive thoughts every day. I have these intense POCD thoughts, some days. And I'm just now able to just let them pass. It's not something that is affecting my life anymore, and it's not something I think about. Um, so just know that like there is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Recovery is not linear. You're going to have lows, and you're going to have highs, and I think it's just important in those moments to remember to be kind to yourself and patient to yourself, because the last thing you need when you're having a low is to beat yourself up. When you've come so far, I think recovery is just like climbing a mountain where, you climb one big peak and then sometimes you have to go back down. But when you're at the bottom of that first trough, you're not going to say, well, I'm back at the bottom of the mountain. You're just going to say, well, I'm at the bottom of the first trough, and there's more highs to go up, and there's more lows to go up, there's more highs to go up until you eventually get to the highs. So just never look back on your journey with recovery as if you're back at square one, because you never are. Even if you've made such huge improvements, and then you suddenly go back 10 steps. It's not actually 10 steps, it's just a new dip that you will get out of. So just keep
I
going
love that.
and keep trying.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's truly inspiring. I mean, you had severe OCD, and to see you now talking about it, how important is education to you?
So important. I think a big part of why I started this page was this realization that, so, we have the statistic that it's 14 to 17 years on average to get an OCD diagnosis, and which means that there are people who are going through these horrific intrusive thoughts, not getting that diagnosis. And then it makes me wonder about the hidden statistic of suicides that we probably have no idea
Mhm.
about regarding
Yep.
OCD, where there are people who, because I remember that feeling. I remember when I was going through POCD and the thought in my head saying I would rather die than be a pedophile. And I just know for a fact that there are so many people that are lost in the suicide statistics that
Yes.
aren't being registered as having OCD. So it's just so important that we have that information around it to really help people. And yeah, and that's why I started my page. I mean, my page was started for one of two reasons. It was initially it was because I thought, I don't, like, shame is the biggest barrier to mental health at the end of the day, and I think that a lot of people who suffer with their mental health, mainly the main symptom of that is shame, and that's really what's dragging them down.
Mhm.
And starting my page was very much well, if it's all on the internet, then there's nothing for me to be ashamed about. So that was kind of initially why it started. But then, just yeah, if I come up on someone's algorithm, if someone scrolls past and sees the word OCD and it's something that they've never seen before, then that means the world to me, and I get a lot of messages of people saying like, "Wow, this has really helped me," and yeah, I think that it's such important information, and it's such a misunderstood disorder that is so incorrectly used in mainstream media, frustratingly
Yeah.
so. And I don't blame anyone. I don't think it's anyone's fault, and I don't think anyone's being malicious about it. It just is
Sure.
it's a symptom of a wider issue of misinformation.
Zachary, what you're doing is so important. We love your page. It is
Thank you.
OCD Stigmatize if you want to find it
Yeah.
there. And we could talk to you forever. You've been fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us, especially all the way out in Vietnam and joining us
Yeah,
via video.
Yes,
it's midnight for you right now. My goodness.
it
We
is
so
midnight.
appreciate you
Yeah.
staying up and chatting with us. That was awesome. Hope to chat with you again someday, and keep up the good work. We'll see you on the gram.
Thank you both.
Okay, so Liam, let's talk about ERP. I know you're revisiting that, and you mentioned the other day when I checked in that it was tough. What's going on there?
Yeah, the ERP stuff is difficult. I had been warned that doing ERP can be really tough and that you have to prepare for that and really set aside time in the day to deal with it. And that has turned out to be true. We're working on a couple of different themes in therapy right now. We're dealing with my relationship OCD. We're dealing with, I don't know if it would be called meta OCD or whatever, but that question, that doubt about whether or not you have OCD, and then dealing with kind of work and perfectionism OCD. So those are the three things we're tackling right now. And what you do is identify the triggers for each, and then she has me writing out sentences that trigger me with each of those, that are exposing me to the fear surrounding it.
You want to
And
give us some
then
examples?
sitting in that discomfort. So, for instance, with OCD, one of the sentences I write down is maybe this is OCD, maybe it isn't. I am choosing not to engage in that debate. And then she asks you where your anxiety is after you've written that. And then you have to sit with that until that anxiety comes back down to a manageable level. And then you go into the next exposure. And so you're basically sitting for an hour in like discomfort. And then you're supposed to work
Oh,
on
because
it
you're
on your
doing
own.
that, you're doing those writing lessons with her in real time, not on your own
Yeah.
throughout the day when the triggers come up. So how do you know what the triggers are? Because I don't know what mine are until I'm facing them in those moments. Maybe it doesn't happen in therapy Are you able to identify those in that hour?
Yes. So you go through, you spend the first few weeks when you're not in the session itself, identifying those moments and then bringing them to therapy, right? So let's say you had something that popped up in your life, you would, write it
Okay.
down or remember, okay, that was the thing. And then when you get into therapy, you're addressing it with her. So I would
Got
come
it.
into therapy the first few sessions and she would say, okay, how are things going? What things are coming up for you? And then once we've gone through those, talked through what those are, how they're showing up for me, then she starts to kind of assign the exposures, and you do them in the session, and then you're supposed to be doing them out of the session as well as homework. For me, and this would be true for you as well, a lot of the stuff that comes up is coming up organically in my life. So, for instance, one of my triggers is if we're watching a television show and there's a character who is divorcing her husband or is having an affair in a show, I get extremely triggered. And
Yeah.
so my job is, if that pops up in media in some way, in a song or in a television show, I need to continue watching it. Typically, what I would have done was turn the show off or turn the song off or change it or whatever. And I thought that was what was best for me. Like, oh, I'm protecting my peace.
No,
But
you're
I
avoiding.
wasn't. I was just not dealing with the emotion that it brought and distracting myself or pushing it away and never actually confronting it. And so that's what I mean by that. Some of them come up organically.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
these exposures now are happening every day, all the time. And I'm learning to sit with the discomfort. The other interesting thing that happens when you're in ERP is once you are sitting with the discomfort, you're supposed to sit with it for a while, and then you do these what are called RPMs, which are response prevention messages. And they are messages that help you get back to baseline. And I just wanted to share one of them with the listeners because I have found it to be super helpful. And it is that sitting in this discomfort is productive, that
Mm-hmm.
I am getting stronger
Mm-hmm.
when I sit with this distress.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, I'm very much like an action person. I want things I can do that are going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And learning that sitting in discomfort, sitting with distress is
Mm-hmm.
productive is just a really powerful concept for me. So now anytime I'm feeling distress or my obsession is triggered and I want to perform a lot, rumination and do checking and reassurance stuff, I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And as hard as that is, that little voice in the back of my head that's like, this is productive, this
Productive.
is good for
This
you,
is one step
is really
closer to
helpful.
freedom. Yeah. I love
Yeah,
that. So it's working. It's hard,
it
but
is
it's all
working.
hard. It's hard if you're not in our ERP, and it's hard if you are. You choose your hard.
Yes. And I think the hard that isn't in therapy is, it's just going to continue to be hard unless you
Yeah,
do
it's
the
only going to
work.
get
Whereas,
harder. Exactly.
yeah, doing the
Yeah.
work is difficult. I mean, it is stressful, and I spend a lot of time in the session being very anxious, but
Yeah.
um, knowing that it's for something and
Yeah.
that I'm working towards something is super helpful.
Well, I'm excited for you. And I know a lot of people listening right now are, that's super helpful information because we don't know what to expect going into therapy. And so hearing that is is nice. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the OCD Confessional. Be sure to follow this show so you get new episodes. You can subscribe to us on YouTube or find us on Instagram and TikTok at the OCD Confessional.